Hello and welcome everyone to another episode of Talk with the Doc. My name is Janvi, and throughout this series I will be talking to doctors of different specialities and those at different stages of their medical journeys to learn more about the variety of opportunities within medicine. In today's episode of Talk with the Doc, I'm going to be talking to Dr Rajesh Sethi, an orthopaedic surgeon working in Manchester.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sethi, for taking some time to talk to me today. And I'm really interested to learn more about what orthopedic surgery is all about. So could you tell me a bit more about your specialty?
Hi, Janvi. It's a great thing which you are collecting this series of video recordings, and I'm sure the budding or aspiring medics will find these useful. Specialty of orthopedics comprises essentially of two sets. One is trauma and the other is orthopedics. So the trauma component is essentially to deal with injuries. Mm-hmm. And I'd suspect it comes from ankle sprains to big motor vehicle accidents. So all form part of trauma. In UK, the trauma surgeons still are based mostly as orthopedic surgeons, as opposed to some of the European countries where trauma surgeons can be general surgeons too.
All right.
But in UK, the essential part of trauma team is an orthopedic surgeon. And our degree, for example, or our training program is called Trauma and Orthopedics. So trauma is essentially injuries, and the orthopedic part is sort of, we can start from right from birth, so congenital problems onwards, to later in life, degenerative conditions where you must have heard of knee replacements and hip replacements and things like that. So they form a huge proportion of our work, and most of our work gets divided as into in acute and elective. Mm-hmm. So that's the basis of trauma and orthopedics. So almost 30% of the GP referrals are due to musculoskeletal conditions.
Right.
And a lot of them do end up needing hospital care, or at least for diagnosis and a management plan to see an orthopedic surgeon. So that's where people like me come into the roles.
Mm-hmm. That sounds really interesting. So within orthopedic surgery, it's split into elective surgery kind of and emergency surgery is what I'm getting. So do you as an orthopedic surgeon do a bit of both, or do you specialize in just one?
Most orthopedic surgeons still currently employed would have a component of both.
Right.
The proportion can vary from where you are working.
Mm-hmm.
But recently there is a trend now of centralization of trauma services. So some of the units are being converted to major trauma center, like the one I'm working in Manchester currently has got the status of a major trauma center now.
Right.
So there we have some of my colleagues whose job plans may have more trauma component, but personally speaking, I have both trauma, that is acute, and elective component. And that gives you a right balance in terms of your daily life, and also gives you a bit more regularity during the week. Mm-hmm. And probably a better life patterns as well than just acute or trauma care.
Oh, right, I see. So did you, obviously you said orthopedic surgery is to do with, a vast number of things. So I'm assuming you can subspecialize, and were you able to subspecialize in anything in particular?
Yeah, I think most orthopedic surgeons initially have to do a full orthopedic training program, which is called specialty training program. I'm sure some of the videos you may have spoken to some general surgeons and other surgical specialty colleagues. And after a core training program in surgery, then you can diversify into a specialty training program, which is trauma and orthopedics. And that's a 6-year program. During that time, I'm sure everyone starts to getting their own interests. And most people then towards the later half of their training will join or take up a fellowship or two. And they might be in the subspecialty of their interest. So my subspecialty is hand and wrist, though I do some upper limb role as well, but predominantly my interest and current roles have been in hand and wrist surgery, which is separate sort of a fellowship which is directed to that. And the interesting part in hand and wrist surgery in this country is that there are two streams of people who can join it. One as orthopedic surgeons, people like me, and the other subgroup which can join into this training program later is plastic surgeons.
Oh, right.
So
Yeah, that makes sense.
they in some units, they form almost 50% of the workforce of a hand surgery department. And in some, for example, in Manchester, in one of the hospitals within the trust has predominantly plastic surgeons delivering the hand service. Whereas in the unit I am, we have predominantly orthopedic surgeons. A mixture of skill sets required.
Sure. So what drew you to first entering orthopedic surgery in particular, and then later subspecializing in hands and wrists? Because it seems like a very, unique line. I mean, of course, you said you can join it from the plastic surgery side as well. So what attracted you to this line in particular?
If the stereotypes of orthopedic surgeons go, I neither look like an orthopedic surgeon who used to be muscle men throughout their careers, or people with brash or blunt personalities. So all the jokes from medical school times are for orthopedic surgeons. They're mostly thought of not very clever guys, whereas the training programs, the training program you have to take for orthopedics is actually quite
long,
competitive as well. So you have to be really doing well academically to get into orthopedic training program. So my interest was that I was more focused about direct patient care. In a way, medical streams, you give medication, you see the outcomes maybe in a day or two, whereas surgical outcomes you can almost see right in the operating theater. And that's something which drew me towards a surgical specialty. Within the surgical specialty, I thought orthopedics, particularly initial phase of orthopedic training, was mainly trauma training. So trauma there, you could see instant outcomes. So somebody comes with a broken leg and you put a nice plaster and they can walk out or go in a sling out of the hospital straight away. And you feel like you've delivered care, which has shown tangible results straight away. So that was one of the attractions towards orthopedics. Specifically hand, I think over a period of time, you start developing your interests. Certain hand conditions, I was always interested in, probably because my initial training was in India. And during that training period, I worked in a unit which had a very skilled hand surgeon. So I was always interested in developing the hand surgery skills, even after coming to this country. And I did a master's program from University of Birmingham, in which my thesis or my dissertation was on hand injuries. So that interest kept on growing, and ultimately I was able to pursue this as a career choice. Not regretted a moment though.
That's great. I was wondering, it seems like you've thought this out very well, and you've had so much experience that's accumulated in making your decision. I was thinking that with the hand in particular, it's such an important organ of the human body, and of course, we're so dependent on it in our day-to-day lives. So I can tell from you that there's a great job satisfaction to be able to see instant progress being made after surgery. But do you also feel that it can be quite a lot of pressure to be able to act and perform on surgery on the hand, which is so important to what we do every day? Has that ever gotten too much for you, too much responsibility?
Not too much responsibility. I think as surgeon, when you hold a scalpel over somebody's body, that responsibility is already there at that time. And I don't actually, as a hand surgery, you'd not actually cause too much bleeding or taking vital organs away. So actually surgical safety profile, or you can say this stress while operating, you're probably not engaged in life-saving surgeries, but what you are trying to deliver is maintaining their life balance or making sure that they are in a functional role. So we are improving the quality of life rather than saving lives in direct terms. So it is less pressure, I'd say. But no, I won't think that pressure has ever gone. Yes, every surgery is stressful. So with every surgery, there comes a stress to deliver a good outcome towards the patient, because you care for a patient, and that's the bottom line. But nothing specific which will worry or which should dissuade any aspiring medic to take up this job.
Great. I was just curious because, of course, you're operating on just the hand, wrist primarily. So in these kinds of surgeries, is the patient put under full anesthesia, or is it just local anesthesia? And can some patients stay awake during your surgeries?
Interesting question from a non-medic. So I really like that. And very thoughtful, I would say. So now you are right in asking that predominant part of our surgery these days is actually done without general anesthetics.
Oh, right.
And predominantly. So I would say, give you an example that for wrist fractures, which are one of the commonest injuries we see, one of our registrars recently presented data of having operated on more than 100 wrist fractures, all under regional anesthesia without any general anesthetic.
Okay.
And a fairly successful series without any need for readmission. Cost is less, patient has less side effects, patient walk into the operating unit and walks out of the operating unit. They don't feel groggy, they don't have any side effects of a general anesthetic. So quite a lot of our surgery is done under regional anesthetics, as we call them. And there is another thing which is now becoming very popular, is Valent surgery, W-A-L-A-N-T. So it's wide awake surgery. So where patient's awake and we are able to perform using local anesthetic, a lot of procedures. Most finger fractures or finger problems, even elective procedures, are usually done under that type of surgery. So general anesthetic is actually becoming a rarity for hand service.
That sounds really interesting. The advancement in medicine, we always hear about it as ongoing, but that's very cool that you can operate on someone while they're still awake, even if it's more, focused on one organ, such as the hand. That's still very innovative. And linking on from the advancement in science, do you think that, how is technology playing a part in your kind of surgery? Because often many people who are disabled or have had an accident which makes them unable to make use of their hands. Is there any scope for technology to be able to help them out and for that to be included within your type of surgery?
It is not just surgery, it is overall. So surgeon itself or surgeon him or herself doesn't work in a vacuum. So we've got a team of healthcare professionals who are trying to improve on the patient's functional outcome. And a lot also depends on our physiotherapy or hand therapy or occupational therapy colleagues. So they work very closely with us, and without their help and interaction, it is very difficult to achieve a better functional outcome. And the scope of providing splints, casts, with technology coming in, particularly 3D printing is coming into vogue now. So we are using 3D, we are able to use 3D printing for some of the surgical procedures. Yet there isn't much scope of robotic surgery in hand surgery, but I see ultimately that component getting more and more common as the robotic surgery becomes more widely acceptable and more widely available. But currently 3D printing has started to show promise in various hand conditions, particularly reconstructive work, where we can model if the patient has a bone loss. So we can actually model it on a 3D printer as to what is the bone loss and accordingly plan the surgery. Similarly, for complex wrist fractures, you can actually print out a broken bone and then plan your surgery before even going to theater.
Wow. Okay.
And similar software is now available as a 3D software to do all the manipulations on the computer first before you go to the operating theater. And that saves a lot of time in theater. The other part, which is getting better technology-wise, is where rehab is coming in.
Okay.
So you're talking of now sort of robotic hand or robotic wrist.
Right.
So those type of rehab equipment for prosthetics and orthotic appliances side, they are coming big style into the market. I'm currently involved with the project with Leeds University with a robotic hand development, which will be a tool for hand exercises for patients with cerebral palsy and things like that. So they are developing a tool which is like a robotic rehab device. And we are working towards making it into a sort of commercially producible product. At the moment, it is in a development stage, and we are doing a project with Leeds University currently. So yeah, technology is making a big improvement in overall patient care.
That's great. With the use of technology and the project you were mentioning with Leeds University, That sounds wonderful, but do you think that there is a place for that within the NHS? Would it, like, once it's developed, would it fit within the budget, or is that
Yes,
not?
yes, definitely. So I think one of the things, actually, the Leeds University is working closely with NHS providers
Right.
in the area. And similarly, similar projects have been done elsewhere as well. So ultimately, NHS is the one delivering healthcare in this country.
Mm-hmm.
So whatever product is developed, unless it can be incorporated within the NHS structure, it's not going to be achieving anything.
Right.
So
Okay.
I think that has to be right at the start. To develop a product, it has to be usable and affordable within the NHS setting.
Great.
So this product or similar products are there available currently, and they are being used in an NHS setting already.
Mm-hmm. I see. Okay. So it seems like quite a useful tool then that can be accessible by anyone in the public who needs that kind of service, which is fantastic news. We're talking about advancement, but I was also wondering, how has COVID and the whole pandemic situation affected orthopedic surgery? Has it made you postpone any types of surgeries? Have you had to divert your attention to other kinds of surgeries instead?
Yeah, I think so. From March 2020, COVID has had an impact on almost all specialties, more so on orthopedics.
Right.
So on one side, our role as a trauma surgeon has continued because the injuries are still happening, accidents are still happening. So that part of work has been there. Whereas the non-urgent stuff, which is the elective procedures, as we were discussing right at the beginning, those have been performed less and less. So for example, for almost 3 or 4 months, hardly any elective activity happened in our trust or most trusts across the country. And as COVID numbers sort of started to go down, now we are in what NHS is calling in the recovery phase, where the impetus is a lot going on now on the non-urgent patients as well, because as you must have seen every day in the news these days is how many number of patients are waiting for non-urgent care in NHS. I think there was a big article this morning, as I think most of the news were carrying news item about the same. So we are in what we call the recovery phase, where the non-acute care has restarted, and we are trying to find innovative ways to enhance our productivity to deliver more work for the patients who require or who've been on the waiting list for a year, maybe more.
Right.
So there's a lot of innovative work is being done by NHS at the moment, and all departments are thinking sort of laterally and trying to find out what is the best solution for their own individual set of patients. But during the COVID pandemic, yes, our non-urgent activities went down significantly, and a lot of us were sort of the sessions we are committed to, or our job plans over the last year have been quite flexible to accommodate for more trauma activity than elective.
Right. Okay. I see. Sure. So it's good to see that after over a year now, that there is progress being made for the plan of recovery and bring things back to normality. And thinking about normality, I was wondering that what is the best thing about your job, and like before COVID, what did you enjoy the most, and sort of what advice would you have for other aspiring medics as to why they should enter orthopedic surgery in particular?
I still feel my role has been gratifying before or after COVID pandemic, and given a choice again, I'd probably, if I was deciding on my career choices again, I'd still make the same career choice of doing orthopedics. And the main thing which attracted me towards orthopedics or trauma is of instant gratification in terms of seeing instant result. That still remains the same. So a patient comes with a deformity, you correct it on the operating table. So there you can, if your patient's under a block, so you can actually show the patient's hand, finger was bent like that, and 20 minutes later it's straight.
It's straight,
and you can actually show the patient their hand, does that look okay? And the smile you get from the patients, that can only come from a surgical specialty.
Sure.
On the other hand, it's not to say that my medical colleagues don't do instant work. Cardiologist with a stent would probably be doing more a life-saving procedure. But to improve the quality of life and getting patients back to their functional levels back again, whether it's after injury or for a sort of congenital or a degenerative condition, I still feel orthopedics is a great specialty to do.
Mhm.
For work-life balance, as you must have heard from other colleagues as well, during the training period, the training programs are not easy, whether it's medical training program or surgical training program. Medical on-calls actually are much worse in a lot of ways.
All right.
But once you've made it on the other end of the training program, then the work-life balance can be quite reasonable.
Right. Okay.
You still have a choice of having acute care into your job plans, but that can be flexible.
Mhm.
And the sort of the frequency of on-calls all across the NHS, particularly on the surgical side, has become less. When I started as a trainee, I was doing 1 in 3 on-calls. Now you'd probably be 1 in 12.
Okay.
So it is much improving. Second, for an aspiring medic, if you are talking to me as somebody who is an aspiring medic, then there is still a workforce imbalance which exists in trauma and orthopedics, with less female trainees into our profession, and Royal Colleges are actively looking to change that.
Yeah.
And there is a lot of push for recruiting more female trainees into the trauma and orthopedics program, and rightly so, because a majority of medical student entrants are females now. And if our specialty doesn't reflect the same, it'll get behind and it may not attract the best candidates. So I think trusts are now looking at offering a better work-life balance so that they can attract not just males, which was traditionally the sort of trauma and orthopedic surgeons profile.
The stereotype.
And currently I've had 3 recent trainees with me, working with me, 3 female trainees. Now we've got consultant colleagues who are females. And last I worked in Leeds, and there it was sort of the 2 female orthopedic surgeons who joined. They were the first ones in sort of 20 years in that department. And now that department has got 4 or 5 within the last 5 years. So that change is happening, and it's for good.
That's great. I'm glad to see there's like lots of development within the specialty, both in the scientific sides of things, but also in terms of equality within the profession and breaking away from the stereotype of what an orthopedic surgeon was. So that's been wonderful to hear about. Thank you so much, Dr. Sethi, for talking to me today. And it was really enlightening to learn more about your specialty. Definitely one that's worth considering now that I've heard from you. So thank you very much.
I wish all the best to you, and maybe look forward to having you as a junior trainee with us.
Great. Thank you so much.
Okay. Take care, Janvi.
Thank you.